The Court of Azathoth reviews Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Well, hello, and welcome back to the show, in what is sure to be a big departure for us, but perhaps a preview of things to come. I am Reese, and I am, of course, being joined once again by the one, the only, the genuine article, Zachary. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you today?
I'm really good. I'm excited for us covering this film. And I think that it opens up a lot of doors of things that we could maybe do in the future. Plus, it's nice to get a little break. I like what we've been covering so far, but it's nice to throw a curveball in every now and then.
Yeah, I agree.
So, was there anything you had in the way of news before we get to our feedback?
I can't say that there is a lot of news, not genre specific anyway.
Mm-hmm. The only news that I could think would be related to what we're covering.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't been following a lot of this, and I wasn't aware that the Godzilla versus King Kong movie was coming so soon.
Oh yeah, no, it's coming out
like next year.
Yeah, like next year.
Well, hey, you know, if they were going to spend 5 years away, they might as well spend it working on something that everyone wants to see. So,
yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, no, it's been a long time coming. I think we've needed a new Godzilla versus Kong movie for a while.
Yeah, that should be fun, and you know, by the time that comes out, hopefully we'll have maybe we'll take a few episodes to look back on the other movies in this timeline. Because I have seen them all now at this point. Granted, there's only 3, but
yeah,
no, they're definitely worth revisiting in preparation for that. We have a few pieces of feedback I wanted to get through before we actually get to the review. So this was in regard to our review of The Tomb, our first episode, from Tito Martinez. He says, "Love the review, but I feel like in the future, the two of you should do a more in-depth review, not the Cliff Notes style that's presented in this podcast. Also, try and not give away the big reveals early on."
Oh yeah, that was my fault. My bad.
It was our first episode, man. You both kind of skipped over the mysticism of the story with the visions and dreams he was given, the allusion to the dead being alive within the tomb, his connection to Hyde family by blood, with his own belief to being the last descendant of the Hyde family. And you talk about the ending being open to interpretation, but the ending has him being completely validated in his belief that everything he lived did indeed happen. So I'm all for getting constructive criticism, especially when it's coming from people who like the show and want the show to get better. So that's totally fine. I encourage that, honestly. But what do you think about that? I stand by the end was kind of open to interpretation.
I can kind of see where his criticism's coming from, which granted that was our first episode. I probably could have done some more thorough note-taking, but yeah, I can kind of see where his criticism's coming from, but at the same time, I think I would probably stand by that too, just because of the way the ending's written. Like, you really don't know if he's crazy or not. Like, from his perspective, he's being validated, but you don't actually, like, are people just, like, giving him what he wants? Or, like, just to shut him up, like because he's crazy or what? Like you don't really you don't really see anyone's perspective in this story but his, so it's hard to tell.
The thing is, it's been a while. I mean, it literally was the first episode. I'm trying to remember back. so he sent, kind of as this last request, in the process of him being sent to an asylum, he sent his servant to check out the Hyde tomb, and he somehow felt that validated everything he had gone through.
Right, because his first name was on the tomb. Or it was on the casket.
It could just be a coincidence, though.
Right.
So I think that, I don't know, I think that there are strong implications in the ending, but he could still be really crazy. Or the ending could be interpreted as he saw his name on a casket and that drove him crazy.
Yeah, that could be it too.
And all of these supernatural occurrences didn't actually happen. So I stand by that being fairly open-ended. And we were praising it for that. We were praising it for not really, for keeping the mystery throughout and not holding your hand. So that's how I feel about that. In terms of us giving more detailed reviews, I think that the shows have gotten better.
I think so,
as they've gone on from there. So
and we'll continue to improve as things go on too.
But yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I was expecting the first one to be a little rough anyway, honestly. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, so have you considered reviewing this is from Marcus, have you considered reviewing A Colder War by Charles Stross? And I actually had to look this up. I wasn't aware of what it was, but I will read the description for you.
Okay.
A Colder War is an alternate history novelette by Charles Stross, written in 1997 and originally published in the year 2000. The story fuses the Cold War and the Cthulhu mythos. The story is set in the early 1980s and explores the consequences of the Peabody expedition and H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. So I'm open to covering it, but I'm open to covering it after we cover At the Mountains of Madness.
Yeah, we should definitely cover At the Mountains of Madness first, but I'm definitely open. That sounds awesome, actually. It sounds like an awesome read. So,
I mean, it's kind of part of the reason why we're doing it this way. One, because covering the older stories provides some kind of foundation. But and I know that you've mentioned it for other Mythos-inspired stories. A lot of them are like this. They are direct sequels to things that H.P. Lovecraft wrote, and I don't think it would make very much sense to review this before we reviewed that story.
Yep, I agree.
So that's how I feel about that. And I think we had one other one. Let's see. Okay, so this one, it was asked specifically of me, but I'll ask you as well. Have you? And this is from Quentin. He's a big fan of ours. I've seen him around in the chats. He asked, "You ever play any tabletop RPGs, the Lovecraft-inspired ones?" I think it depends on what you count as an RPG. I've played Eldritch Horror, and I've tried my hand at the Arkham Horror card game. I haven't played too many beyond that. And if we're counting those, because I know some people are kind of picky about what would count as a tabletop RPG, and some of them you would have purists who think that you actually can't have cards or a board. You need to just use your imagination and be completely role playing. And no, I haven't done that. But have you played any of these games?
I can't say that I have, at least not any that are explicitly Lovecraftian. I've certainly played D&D games where there might be some
obvious
Lovecraftian
influence
stuff like mixed in somewhere. But these were separate like campaigns. These weren't like official, like by the book. lore things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not super into like tabletop RPGs. They take a lot of effort to get together and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I've played a few of them in my time. As far as card games go, I used to be really into Magic the Gathering. Um, Back when I had my collection, I probably must have had close to $5,000 or $6,000 in cards. Yeah, and that's just what I spent. That's not like what I actually owned. So there were cards in there that probably were worth more than I was giving them credit for. Um, yeah, I can't say I've played I haven't played the Eldritch card game or anything like that. Well, that game kind of sounds cool. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I'm
Oh
not
yeah,
into
no.
the card games as much anymore. The only thing I've been playing lately, as far as card games goes, is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links
Mm-hmm.
on my phone. It's about as far as I get anymore, as far as card games
Mm-hmm.
go. Um, Other than that, I can't say I have. I would be open to maybe. It would definitely be a fun time, but
Yeah, for sure.
I'm pretty open to. I mean, I'm a game developer, so I'm pretty open to games. So
And the thing is, it would be considerably easier to organize through a platform like this if we
yeah,
were to be open-minded and try our hands at some kind of Cthulhu-inspired RPG.
no, I think it would be a lot of fun. We could definitely give it a shot sometime down the road. I think that'd be really cool. I've seen people like Destiny and stuff do D&D games.
We definitely
By
need,
streaming. You need more people, but
yeah. So down the line, that's a possibility. We would definitely need some kind of DM who actually knew what they were doing, because
yeah,
neither of
yeah.
us do.
No.
I wanted to ask you though, a big part of why Lovecraftian fiction and the Cthulhu mythos resurfaced again in popular culture
Mm-hmm.
is because of games like this
Yep.
in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that fiction found a new home in like a totally different medium that Lovecraft never could have even imagined?
I think a lot of it had to do with just the popularity of games like Dungeons and Dragons and like Vampire the Masquerade. Um, these are games that like you can set yourself down in a universe with that might have like some general rules set up uh, by the game makers, but overall it's your own world. Like you can create your own experience. So I think a lot of that has to do with the popularity of those games.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as like the card games and stuff goes, just the popularity of Magic the Gathering alone uh, was enough to propel most card games that we're familiar with today into existence. So, like the Pokemon trading card game, uh, Digimon, Dragon Ball Z. There's a long list of card games out there, and they're all of them. Every one of them is based on Magic the Gathering in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, it's a great game. So, which I don't think they touch on a lot of Lovecraftian stuff in the Magic lore. They might a little bit, but I don't know. I'm not familiar with current Magic the Gathering lore. I'm like 10 years out of date at least on that, so I don't
That's
know what's
fair.
going on there anymore. But
I think it has a lot to do with Lovecraft's fiction. It almost feels like you're discovering this forgotten mythology in some way. And
well, yeah,
that, I mean, there are people, you'll find them online, who will insist to you that the Necronomicon is a real book, that all these things, that Lovecraft was in contact with some truth beyond this world.
yeah,
I think a lot of people who do RPG like games, they just want to find themselves in an interesting universe, and
Right.
Lovecraft certainly had an interesting universe. And
And I agree with and like one thing I kind of wanted to bring up is his work is so heavily referenced. It's so heavily because it's everywhere in popular culture.
We're gonna find that out later today.
Like one good example. I don't know if you've ever seen the television show Supernatural.
Yes.
Okay, there's an episode. Okay, well, there's an episode sometime way down the line. Dean runs into this woman who's the curator of a museum, and he finds out that she's some kind of weird eldritch horror from another dimension. And so he thinks about killing her, but like she's been a friend to him this entire time. So she turns to him and she says, "You can try if you want. You're probably not going to succeed." And then when he asks her like what she is and where she came from, she says to him, "Well, you may know a man named H.P. Lovecraft. He summoned me here by accident, trying to summon something worse." So, yeah, he tried to summon something else, but I slipped through. And I'm the inspiration for all his stories, basically, is what she said.
Wasn't Lovecraft in Supernatural? There was some show where they had him in it. I think it was some kind of time travel thing.
If he has been, I don't think I've seen that specific episode.
I could probably check his wiki, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible.
But no, that's funny that they'd even go out of their way to.
Yeah, that was one of the better episodes of the later seasons.
Interesting. Did you in the episode, did they show her in her eldritch form?
No, you never see it, I don't think. She never shows it off. I can't remember what happens to her. She might die. Somebody might come along and kill her later. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and rewatch it, figure it out for certain. Anyway, yeah, you see that type of stuff all the time. Another obvious reference is the Living Dead series, or the Walking Dead series, or the main character's name is Ash or whatever.
Oh, the Evil Dead.
Evil Dead, sorry.
There's way too many zombie things now.
Well, I'm kind of a nerd. I should know Evil Dead, but yeah. Anyway, the Necronomicon is a big part of that.
Oh yeah, that's like one of the most obvious references ever. Okay, so yeah, this is where I saw it. Lovecraft also appears in the season 6, episode 21 episode "Let It Bleed" of the TV show Supernatural. So he does appear.
Oh, cool.
In an episode, but that is far beyond what I've watched. I might honestly, I think it's on Netflix. I might just watch for that episode.
Yeah.
There we go. Season
I'm mostly
6,
caught up,
episode 21.
I must have missed that episode.
There you go. That's very interesting. I mean, of course they're going to throw it in. That's the kind of show it is. But yeah, any other thoughts on the RPGs?
Not at the moment. No, I think it'd be a good idea later on down the line. Try to get a game like that together.
For sure. We'll remain open-minded and wait for an expert to guide our path. For now, we are going to get into our review of Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So for this film, I'm going to be doing the recap,
Mm-hmm.
and my recap is probably not going to be the most detailed thing in the world. Keep in mind, this movie is not out on DVD yet. It's still in theaters as we're recording this, and I've seen it twice, so I think I should do okay. But it's going to be more of a general outline than anything else. But basically, the story of this movie is we see a flashback of the attack in the first Godzilla movie from 2014 in this series. And during this attack, a family loses their young son.
Mm-hmm.
And this, of course, leads to marital troubles, because that's what you want in your Godzilla movie. Marital troubles.
Mm-hmm.
They go on. It's set 5 years later, so it's set in the modern day. We see that Vera Farmiga, I really hope I'm pronouncing her name right, the lady from The Conjuring,
Mm-hmm.
she plays a woman named Emma, and she is a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Millie Bobby Brown is her daughter from
Mm-hmm.
Stranger Things, another extremely Lovecraftian show.
Yeah.
So that's no accident, I don't think. Anyway, they are in China, and they're overseeing a site where a dormant titan is being kept, and there's seismic activity in the area, and they receive news that you need to get down here because it is hatching.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out when it hatches, this titan is Mothra
Mm-hmm.
in a larval form. It is also revealed during this part of the movie that Emma invented a device called the Orca that is designed to analyze the bioacoustics of titans and can be used to control them by identifying an alpha signal
Mm-hmm.
that they will respond to.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, this is way too much power for any one person to have. They are able to calm down Mothra, but that doesn't last long because a group of eco-terrorists take over the base, led by a former British special ops guy, and they kill everyone except for Emma and her daughter, Madison. And they seemingly take them hostage, and they also take the Orca with them. I think while we're going through this, we'll probably take breaks to just get general thoughts here and there. What are you thinking of the movie so far?
I thought that Tywin Lannister was a great choice for the eco-terrorist leader.
He really is.
He's a wonderful actor. I thought most of the actors in this movie were really well cast. I thought most of the acting was really well done for the most part. There are characters that I don't like, just like as they're written. Or
we'll
just
get
because
into
of the
that.
way things go in the movie. But yeah, we'll get into that. The Mothra scene was a great scene. I'm a stickler for like real science, and this whole alpha thing is a little outdated. But for the sake of the movie, I'm willing to roll with it.
Yeah, if you're a fan of science, like a hardcore stickler, this is not your movie.
Yeah, not at all. There's a lot of science fiction or straight up science fantasy in this. But it's I thought the Mothra scene was great. The daughter is probably one of my favorite characters, at least through most of the film, some of the film anyway. She gets a little annoying near the end, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I mean she's played by a really talented young actress.
Oh yeah, everybody in this movie was exceptionally talented. The only character I didn't really like at all was the gray-headed guy, the guy that makes all the quips, but we'll get to him.
Yeah, I guess they figured they needed the comic relief.
Yeah, I'm not a real big fan of like comedy relief for its own sake. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There have been other Godzilla films where this character doesn't really like, and this is an American film, so you can only expect so much. But
You know what's funny is on the wiki the director verified that character, Dr. Stanton, is loosely modeled off of Rick from Rick and Morty.
I could see that.
And they had the character drinking a lot to show that.
I think that would explain why like everybody I've heard talk about this movie just doesn't seem to like him very much. Like at all. They don't like a lot of them didn't even think he needed to be in the movie.
Yeah, because he doesn't really do anything, and
yeah,
he just are quips and jokes.
Yeah, you could have had the entire movie without him, and it wouldn't have changed anything. But I mean, other than that, it was great. Like all the acting, like even the guy that plays that dude was really good at what he did. I just didn't care for the role.
Yeah. So. We'll get into it. Yeah. I had complaints. Most of them, especially with a second viewing, I was able to rationalize away. But there is one I cannot, and I will be saving that.
Okay.
So we catch up with some of the other characters, some who we've seen before in the previous movie, and some who are new. New characters include Dr. Mark Russell. He is Emma's ex-husband and Madison's father, and he's, living the stereotypical, oh, I need to live a secluded life after I witnessed this horrible thing that we've seen in a million movies. And he's approached by the science team working for Monarch, and they relay to him the really bad news that his family has been kidnapped, and the device that he helped build a prototype for that he never wanted to be built has been stolen by terrorists, and also Mothra is on the loose.
Yep.
Included among the scientists, of course, is Ken Watanabe, who is the real hero of this movie, as far as I'm concerned. Besides Godzilla, of course, the real human protagonist. But and a few other people who I can't bother to remember. No offense. So anyway, they go to their base. They have a base at sea, which they use to monitor Godzilla. Mark was under the impression that Godzilla was missing, but that is a big lie that Monarch has been keeping from the world. Mark has a hatred for Godzilla because he blames Godzilla for the death of his son, although we never see this fully realized on screen, and we have to assume that if Godzilla did kill his son, it was collateral damage.
Well, obviously, I think Godzilla would probably, like, and any creature that big would most likely ignore, like, it would be like if I got into a fight with someone over an anthill, and then, like, the ant would get mad at me, the ant dad would get mad at me.
You killed my ant son.
Like, I'm not going to see that, even if I did it, like, I didn't do it on purpose. Your son happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, so. And that sucks, but I'm a big giant monster, and I can't do anything about it. I more than likely kill a few humans every time I wash up on land, so, yeah.
Yeah. We also see that Mark has a hatred for all Titans, but especially Godzilla for some reason. I mean,
yeah, he seems to be, and this is a trope you see a lot in movies, where the main character hates the protagonist for whatever reason, but then later on just kind of comes to, if not like him, then at the very least like respect it.
I just hate it anymore. Honestly, it's not the big issue I was talking about earlier. It is a small quibble. I think it goes on a bit long, and all I can think while I'm watching scenes like this of him being like, oh, I really hate Godzilla, is, wasn't Godzilla like, he only came to that city in response to fight the other monsters. If Godzilla hadn't have shown up, those other monsters would have just wreaked havoc. And there would have been no one able to stop them. So I think it's kind of silly, I feel bad that he lost his son, but to harbor such a hatred against Godzilla just
well, I mean, and that kind of loss can make people irrational too. Otherwise, rational people will just start like behaving in irrational ways, start thinking irrational thoughts. Godzilla is obviously prime mover in these movies for the most part. So it's not entirely like unrealistic for him to focus his hatred on Godzilla, I guess, because the Mutos are dead, obviously. So, although we do see one later, I think. But yeah,
yeah, I thought we did. That was interesting.
Yeah, one of the Titans that wakes up as a Muto,
and apparently is cool with Godzilla by the end.
Yeah,
hey,
that was one. But anyway,
it is what it is. Maybe they ran out of monster designs. They were like, let's throw in this little.
Yeah, we'll get into the monster designs too, because I've got some things to say about
that. So anyway, we're kind of cutting back and forth between scenes with Monarch and scenes with the eco-terrorists holding Emma and Madison. Mm-hmm. And for a while, we're led to believe that Emma and Madison are still hostages.
Mm-hmm.
They end up flying to Antarctica because there's another Monarch base that is holding a Titan only known as Monster Zero. We will get back to that in a second. They intend to use the Orca to set this monster free. Of course, they kill all of Monarch at the base, and they pretty quickly set up shop and begin drilling through the ice. And through the ice, we can see that there is a giant 3-headed dragon. Cue the drum roll.
Dun dun dun.
Wonder who that could be. I've never seen that image before. So in the meantime, the protagonists and Monarch, they begin following Godzilla because they believe Godzilla is drawn to the Monarch signal as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they attempt to follow him, but for some reason, and this is a plot point that comes up later, they say, "Oh well, we lost him around Venezuela," and I like Mark's reaction of, "You lost him? Like, how can you lose Godzilla? Like he's so big." I have to think that line has to be a reference to the first American Godzilla movie.
It could be.
That has to be a jab where they lose Godzilla in Manhattan. They can't. They lose him in the fog. They can't find him in this giant crowded city. I have to think that's a jab. Maybe I'm wrong, but it is what it is. But they end up forgetting about Godzilla for a minute, and they continue on their way to Antarctica, and they are especially worried because they are getting no message back from the Monarch base in Antarctica. So they know that something is up, and you can tell there's a lot of tension in the air because, well, they all know what's in Antarctica. And they know what should not be released under any circumstances. So they arrive there, and there is some sneaking around. There is some gun battles between the terrorists and Monarch. Eventually, there's a confrontation where Mark pulls a gun on what's-his-face? Jonah Allen, the leader of the terrorists.
Yep.
And he's begging his family to come to him, saying, you're safe, we're going to go home. And it is at this point, it is revealed that they weren't hostages at all.
Yep.
They are completely in on what's been happening. And
yep.
We will definitely have a lot to say about that.
Yep.
In one of the most what the fuck scenes I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was definitely a what the fuck scene.
So, long story short, the terrorists use the chaos because Emma ends up blowing the ice to set Monster Zero free. They use this chaos to escape, and Mark is unable to catch up with them because he spends time helping the Monarch soldiers.
Right.
They end up getting back to the Antarctic surface, and as the eco-terrorists are flying away, Emma, although a little, mournfully, does send out the bioacoustic signal that awakes Monster Zero. He completely destroys the base and emerges from the pit, and it is one King Ghidorah. What are you thinking of What are you thinking of this film's King Ghidorah?
I thought King Ghidorah was an amazing monster. They really outdid themselves on this one in particular. I thought he was the best looking monster in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The way he moved was just like how like I always kind of like saw King Ghidorah moving in my head. You know what I mean? Because he's just so goofy looking in the Japanese films for the most part. The older ones especially. His heads are flying all over the place and stuff, and he just has to stand on his 2 feet. In this one, it was great. He's slithering around on his belly. He's using his wings to kind of move himself around like a dragon might, you know. I thought this two tails rattle like a rattlesnake, so I thought that was a really cool.
And that's the first thing we see of him is we see a spiked tail come out of the pit, and you're like, "Oh fuck!"
Yeah, yeah. They did an amazing job. Like all three of the heads were really expressive, and
they got into fights sometimes.
Yeah, they got into fights and stuff. Like the center head didn't appear to like the head on the left a lot. He was always snapping at it.
Because there's a point. Well, we'll get to it in a minute. It's mildly amusing as opposed to the guy making quips. So you can have humor in the movie, just don't completely grind the movie to a halt to tell your joke.
Well, I mean, there were a lot of like places in the movie where like he had a quip and for like no real reason. It kind of pulls you out of like the intensity of the experience a little bit. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like there's just like there's a time and a place to be a wise ass, to be an asshole. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's like within the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then afterward, no.
Yeah.
That would not fly in real life.
Yeah.
Under any circumstances. But anyway, Ghidorah has emerged, and it should be said they're actually not calling him Ghidorah yet. They're calling him Monster Zero.
Monster Zero, yep.
For, I guess because Monarch isn't...
Monster Zero is a reference to an older Godzilla movie where... King Ghidorah's original designation was Monster Zero, so it's a throwback to that. But I don't remember specifically which one it was. Ghidorah's been in a lot of Godzilla movies.
He has to be the most often appearing antagonist, I would think.
Other than as an antagonist, maybe. He might appear. I think. I actually don't know how many movies he's been in off the top of my head. So
that is the thing to keep in mind for this.
If nothing else, he's definitely Godzilla's most iconic.
Oh sure,
antagonist. So
yeah, we're not the most knowledgeable, to be honest, when it comes to older Godzilla. I've seen a good number of them, but
I've seen most Godzilla movies. But in all honesty, like in terms of plot, Godzilla doesn't have a lot going for it as an IP. There's usually just enough plot, especially in the older movies, to justify two monsters beating the crap out of each other, and that's it. That's all there is as far as plot. You get some stuff, like there's some human-centric stuff, and you get like I think the one movie I really remember that had Ghidorah in it was the one where they have this team of people that have to go back in time for some reason, and they have these cute little like radioactive like rat things with them. And these little rat things are what grow up to become Ghidorah later. And they end up leaving these creatures like in the past. And then as they grow up, they become King Ghidorah. And then they kill Godzilla. But then King Ghidorah goes crazy and starts attacking everybody. So they have to bring Godzilla back. Only that Godzilla is evil. So after he kills King Ghidorah, he starts destroying Japan. So they have to resurrect King Ghidorah as Mecha King Ghidorah. And then have Mecha King Ghidorah kill him, or at least drive him off. And I can't remember. This was one of those weird movies, where they kind of flipped Godzilla's role. I think maybe they were switching out like directors or something at Toho, and they were making room for a different kind of Godzilla film. Because up until that point, Godzilla was strictly speaking mostly a good guy. To the point where he was almost cartoony. There are movies where he and Ghidorah get into fights on Monster Island and stuff because King Ghidorah is picking on his kid or whatever. There are films where there's at least 2 or 3 films where Mothra and Rodan both team up with Godzilla to kick King Ghidorah's butt. King Ghidorah is also an alien creature and is tied in with some space aliens somehow. There's a lot of really weird, like, convoluted crap that goes on in Godzilla films that they don't really, like, justify very well. It's just sort of like it's almost an episodic thing, like everything's kind of contained in its own film, but at the same time they've got a universe. So it's like you'll often see references to other Godzilla films in current Godzilla films, and there's plenty of throwbacks in this movie. But I don't know, when it comes to Ghidorah, he's always been pretty antagonistic. There might be a couple of movies where he's more or less on Godzilla's side for at least a little bit, but yeah, for the most part, I thought they captured the character dead on. This was probably the best rendition of Ghidorah I've ever seen.
Yes.
You can really tell that CGI has come a long way in the last decade as far as making these monsters look good. Oh, Ghidorah was so beautifully well designed. Like his heads, like the way they moved. It was like a Smog with 3 heads, basically. It was really cool.
Yeah, they definitely utilized that, and that is pretty much the main draw of the movie. I just checked. King Ghidorah, including this film, has been in 9 films.
I believe it.
So if someone can find an antagonist who's been in more, let us know. But I would think that he's probably the most common antagonist.
He's definitely the most iconic, even if he's not used as much as some other monsters. Destroya might see a little bit more action.
Possibly. Yeah, I mean, there was really no one else they could use for this, though.
Yeah, there really isn't.
This is who they had to throw in as, okay, we don't want it to be like the last movie where it's just Godzilla fighting monsters that we made up for this.
Yeah.
that really have that aren't iconic. They wanted to throw in someone iconic, and they threw in Ghidorah. But anyway, getting back into the plot here, obviously the Monarch team that's left on the ground is a bit alarmed by a giant 3-headed dragon suddenly appearing in front of them. So they run. Some of them, to their credit, try to stand and fight and shoot at him. And this mildly annoys King Ghidorah before he uses his lightning breath and utterly annihilates them.
Yeah, it wasn't even a contest.
And this was one of the funny parts. So one of the heads is licking at the singed earth where the humans were standing.
Yep.
And then the main head snaps at him like, hey, get your head in the game, quite literally. So that was a nice little funny thing. They didn't have to throw it in, but they did, just to say like, hey, he's not always all there.
Yeah, no, giving each head its own personality was a fantastic touch for the character, which I think that's something they were always kind of gunning for in Godzilla films, but you don't see it much probably because the effects are so just silly, poor.
They're able to actually realize it in this one.
Yeah.
So they're running to their plane, or kind of their futuristic helicopter-looking carrier, and it gets damaged at some point, and Ghidorah's closing in, and all looks doomed. And at that point, we see a very familiar blue glow under the ice, and who should appear but Gojira. And he shows up, and they have a very iconic standoff on the ice, and they have their first fight of the movie, in which Godzilla does not overpower him in any way. In fact, he even misses with his atomic breath at one point.
Yeah.
Because Ghidorah is so quick with his necks. He's able to dodge the breath. And only with the assistance of Monarch's Air Force are they really able to hold Ghidorah off. When Godzilla gets up again to continue the fight, Ghidorah says, "No, fuck this shit," and he flies away.
Yeah, he can't take on both the humans and Godzilla at once. It's too much for him.
No.
Takes off.
How convenient.
Yep.
So at this point, you might have to help me. I'm really trying to remember where the movie goes from this point.
So from this point,
oh, you know what? I know. I'm sorry. The eco-terrorists, we catch up with them, and they decide that waking up one monster is not enough, even though they've done more than that. They sent Mothra loose as well. So there's 2 monsters on the loose because of them, but they decide to go for 3, and they end up going to Mexico, where they believe Rodan is being kept. And there seems to be some kind of internal conflict because Emma, wanted to release them one at a time. This is also the point when Monarch is very much in shock because they can't believe that Emma, a scientist who used to work for them, would be teamed up with Alan Jonah and his mercs. And so they're having a conversation about this. They can't believe it until Mark confirms it, because he saw it up close and personal that she did indeed set Ghidorah loose. And speak of the devil, she actually gives them a Skype call and basically tells them that yeah, I know what you're probably thinking of me. I'm some horrible person. And they're like, what the hell are you doing? And okay, this needs to be said. During her Skype call to them, she has perfectly edited video footage of just atrocities and world hunger to go along with her little rant.
Yeah, that was a little weird.
About how humans are an infection. So, again, something I've heard a million times in movies. Basically, it basically boils down to, oh, you're all concerned about some great disaster. Look around. We are the great disaster. There's war and famine and poverty. And somehow this justifies me setting monsters loose to kill millions of people.
Yeah, it's the balance of nature trope. It's exceptionally popular in movies. You see it a lot, especially in movies like Spirited Away. A lot of anime movies like that, especially from that particular company, have that same motif. Basically, nature knows how to take care of itself. Blah blah blah. Ignoring that human beings are also natural, and therefore, in a sense, what we do is in fact natural. But that's a philosophical argument. That's something else entirely. That's not something I want to get into too much, or we'll be here for an extra couple hours.
Yeah, that's a good point that pretty much destroys this entire trope in my mind.
Yeah,
but anyway, she hangs up, and not after Mark gets in some jabs about how this won't bring back their dead son. And this is, I don't know how you go from my son was killed during an attack between Titans to I must now use Titans to destroy humanity and reshape the Earth. But hey, what?
Yeah,
who am I to judge?
I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I didn't like Emma in this movie.
Yep.
I thought she was the worst character, like the worst written character out of all of them.
Oh yes.
There's no logic to her motivation. There's not a lot of anything to her motivation at all.
We might as well just get it all out of the way now, because I kind of wanted to save it for the end, but really, fuck it.
Well, okay, so the scene where they release Ghidorah is the scene where I initially decided I don't like this character, and it's not even because she betrays everybody. It's the goofy, roundabout way, like, she makes her, like, through the first half hour of the movie, you're convinced she's a victim, only to find out later that not only is she not a victim, she basically had all of her friends murdered and offed to do this. And it's like for someone that obviously like at least seems to care about the people around her, this is a really weird like choice for that person to make.
Yes.
She was being all pally with her monarch buddies one minute, and then the terrorist group comes in and they kill everybody in that control room. They kill everyone. And it almost makes it seem like if she had been in that control room when they busted in, she would be dead too. That's what it makes it look like. And you find out later, no, she orchestrated this entire thing. It's like, really? Like your goal here is to do what exactly? Because I don't see how releasing a bunch of monsters onto the population is gonna do much. It's really weird. It was just I don't know,
will create the balance.
Yeah, her motivations didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like I get that she's like suffering, like she's grieving over her lost kid,
and somehow that's supposed to justify causing the suffering of untold numbers of people.
Yeah, like what exactly? Like what was the like? I don't know what she thinks. Like even if this plan of hers works, like people are still gonna die. The whole point to balancing things out, quote unquote, is to just remove human beings from the top of the food chain and make us like a prey animal almost of sorts. So giving us some healthy competition, you know what I mean? Balancing out the ecosystem or whatever. But it's just, I don't know, it's a really weird Darwinist like idea to come from someone who is portrayed as being a loving, caring human being.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It was just It was just weird. It was just a weird choice to make her the primary villain.
I'll be saying things about it throughout, and I really don't want it to weigh down the movie because I think that there's a lot to like about this movie.
Yeah, there is a lot to like about this movie. There's even like I said, the woman that plays this character did a fantastic job with what. No,
she's a good actress. She just happens to be playing a really bad character.
Yeah,
it happens. But after she hangs up, this is where it really gets ridiculous. We find out that she contacted the eco-terrorists. Mm-hmm. This entire plan is hers. She provided the most powerful weapon on Earth to terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
And we're supposed to feel bad because her son died. Fuck that. This is her plan. That's what Alan Jonas says. This is your plan. It's now or never. They're waiting to release Rodan.
They tried very hard to make her seem like just to make her seem sympathetic, and she's not. Nothing about her. No.
That's the unforgivable part. If you're going to have an evil character, let them be evil. That's fine. We see that in plenty of movies. I'm only upset that they tried to take a clearly evil character and make us feel bad for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is just not happening.
I'm not even against you can make an evil character sympathetic to a degree,
but you can't make an evil character the hero.
Right. She's I don't know. It was just I don't know. That was just the weirdest choice for me. But
she
have to push the plot forward somehow.
She eventually relinquishes and decides, it is now or never. We're in our window, so she activates the Orca again, and this sets Rodan loose from his volcano prison. And this really upsets Madison. We'll get into that in a minute because I've got a few other words to say about that. What are you thinking about Rodan, though? Let's say something positive about the movie.
Okay, so the Rodan scene might have been the best scene in the film.
When he's coming out of the volcano and he screeches, it's pretty badass.
Yeah, oh man, it's so cool. And then he raises his wings up and he's about ready to take off. And oh man, he was such a good looking monster. So cool. And what I really liked was and they do this a lot in movies that are really CGI heavy. Movies like this are often really dark. this was a criticism that I saw a lot um, about the movie from other critics, from other people, that the movie was really dark. Um, I can see. I mean, like, I know why they do that. They do it to help make their CGI look better, so they don't have to cover up as many mistakes.
Oh, sure.
Um,
The last Godzilla movie, I'm pretty sure every fight scene was in the dark.
right, and even in this, even in this movie, most of the fight scenes are probably in the dark. Ghidorah is only ever really seen in the dark. You don't get too good of a look at him except for the scene after this one.
Well, there's an excuse with him because
one.
he generates storms.
Well, right, and that's that's an okay thing. I thought. I know it bugged some people, but CGI, especially for a character as complicated physically as Ghidorah is, would be such a mess. I can't even begin to imagine the type of the texturing engines and the lighting engines they had to use to get Ghidorah to look right. Must have been insane.
It took literally years.
Yeah. Well, like in video games, when you make CGI like this, it's a little different. Because it's a little bit more it's a little simpler, I guess. It's not really the word I'm looking for. Optimized is the word I'm looking for. It's more optimized. Characters are simpler. There's not as many faces. There's not as many polys to worry about. But in movies like this, you're dealing with characters that are made up of millions of polygons sometimes. These are some really realistic looking creatures. And in order to get that effect, in order to really knuckle down on that effect, it's easier, I guess, and cheaper to use darker scenes. Because that way, if you do screw up, or if there's like a problem with your lighting engine or something, it might not show up as bad.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you might get things like artifacts, like pixeling and stuff. So I can see why they do it. I can also see why people get annoyed with it. This was a huge criticism for the last few episodes of Game of Thrones as well. So a lot of those were.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, you can. The scenes at night in this movie are not nearly that badly lit.
No.
You
they
can see what's going on.
Nah, they even in a lot of the darker scenes, you can tell they put like a blue filter over everything so that things can pop up a little bit more. You can see what's going on a bit. They were definitely mindful of that more so in this film. I thought so. It almost seemed like they took some of the criticisms from Game of Thrones and applied it to this movie, and were like, okay, well, how can we not fuck this up like that? So, yeah, no, I thought the Rodan scene was fantastic. I loved the way that, like, when they first shoot at him and he just takes off, and then he starts like doing barrel rolls and stuff to get rid of the jets, and he just snatches a couple of jets up in his claws, and he bites the cockpits and he kills the guys inside. Oh, and the best part was the one where that guy used his ejector seat, right, to pop out of his jet, and Rodan just scoops him up in his mouth right there, right over him. Like, oh man, that was so cool. Rodan's probably my favorite monster too, by the way. I think he's probably my favorite Toho monster. He's usually in, and yeah, they just, man, it was such a good scene. As he flies, he just causes these sonic booms that just decimate the city below him. One thing I didn't like about this scene, though, was when they were trying to direct Rodan, like, towards the storm or whatever, they directed him directly over the city they were trying to evacuate. So it was almost their fault that Rodan destroyed the city. I thought that was a really weird strategic choice for, like, you guys are evacuating this city, so you're going to have this giant monster fly right over it, and the mere act of him flying over it is going to destroy this city. So, like, what are you doing? Like, I get that you're trying to save people, but you're putting them in harm's way in an attempt to save them. I don't know. That was a weird strategic choice for me, but it led to some pretty fantastic scenes, so I kind of let it slide.
Yeah, I guess you really have to question what they were able to even do.
Yeah,
it was a miracle they could even get him to go any direction at all, really.
Yeah.
But they do get his attention, and of course he takes out the entire air fleet except for their main ship. So they put Rodan over, but it is revealed that the storm that they're heading toward is moving too fast for any storm, and it's changing direction. So
that was the thing too. Is the storm moves with Ghidorah, and as soon as Rodan wakes up, Ghidorah starts heading for him.
Absolutely, because he can sense he can sense the other Titans, and of course, at the center of the storm is Ghidorah, and once Rodan is aware of that, he very quickly abandons hunting the humans and engages in an aerial battle with Ghidorah. It's pretty short, but
Ghidorah wastes him.
It's nice to see the other monsters fight besides it just being Godzilla versus whoever.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the point of this movie, is to
that was
monsters fight.
Yeah, that was one thing that bummed me out. I thought Rodan could probably put up a little bit better fight than that.
Oh yeah, no, he gets absolutely Shrek'd.
Yeah.
And he becomes Ghidorah's toady for the rest of the movie.
Yep. Which is an interesting choice, I thought. Usually Rodan is on Godzilla's side in these films, at least in the Japanese ones. There are some movies where he and Godzilla fight. But usually when it comes to facing off against Ghidorah, it's always Godzilla, Rodan, and Mothra versus Ghidorah. That's just how it is. But they didn't go that direction in this film, so I thought that was an interesting choice. It was kind of nice to see them take a little bit of creative license with that. So
I think they wanted to put Godzilla over, and if you make it so Godzilla needs other monsters helping him at all times to take down one monster, it probably doesn't look good to an American audience.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see why they made that decision.
And speak of him, Godzilla shows up in this fight as well, and battles Ghidorah in the water. It's revealed to Monarch that we get this scene that always happens in movies. The military has launched a weapon,
and this always weapon.
This goes so well, and it's a prototype. It's called the Oxygen Destroyer, and it is meant to destroy all life forms within a 2-mile radius. And of course, honestly, I kind of like the scene for how unabashedly stereotypical and corny it is. Because the general even says, "May God have mercy on us all."
Yeah. No, he calls them and warns them that, we already launched this thing. It's already on its way. It's coming in hot. You guys have 2 minutes to get the hell out of there. And you can kind of see what's going on under the water as Godzilla and Ghidorah are fighting.
And Godzilla's winning, and he tears off one of Ghidorah's heads.
He tears off Ghidorah's left head.
the unfocused head. The runt head.
And the Oxygen Destroyer itself is actually a throwback to the first Godzilla film.
Yes, it is. Which killed him outright in that movie. And then somehow he came back for 40 more movies.
Yeah.
I don't remember how. But
they explain it off somewhere. Godzilla's got some kind of Wolverine-esque regenerative powers. And basically, as long as even a few of his cells survive, he can regenerate.
Wow, that's convenient.
Yeah.
I wish I had such a power.
Yeah. No, that's how they explain Space Godzilla and a bunch of other monsters. Yeah.
Oh man.
Space Godzilla doesn't make any sense at all. He's such a weird character. Some of Godzilla's cells get sucked into a black hole, and somehow in that black hole, Space Godzilla becomes Space Godzilla, and he manages to make his way out of a black hole, which shouldn't be possible, and then make his way back to Earth to do battle with the original. I don't remember that movie super well. I have seen it a couple times, but it's been a while.
If a creature can make it out of a black hole, there is nothing in the universe that should be able to challenge him.
That's what I said. I was like, this movie doesn't make any sense. If he can leave a black hole, if he can just take off, what the heck? Doesn't make any sense at all.
You can't be mad because they just have such a charm. They throw that shit in there and they don't even care. They're just fuck it, accept it. This is how our movie's gonna be.
Yep.
I can't even be mad. So anyway, the Oxygen Destroyer does indeed hit, and just a bunch of fish float to the surface, and it looks like, oh, did it kill them both? And a monster rises to the surface, and it is Ghidorah. He has survived, and
not only does he survive, it seems like he's apparently completely unaffected by the oxygen destroyer weapon at all.
No effect.
Yeah,
and we'll get into why I think that is later. But Godzilla, they're monitoring his vitals, and they're falling, and it seems like Godzilla dies, and they're just like, oh shit, well, we just killed our best chance of taking down Ghidorah. Ghidorah flies to the top of the volcano that Rodan broke out of, and Rodan pledges loyalty to him, and Ghidorah screams to the sky. He lets off some massive storm, and he starts to awaken titans around the world who have been dormant for the entirety of human history, pretty much. And they come out on every continent. This is being monitored by the eco-terrorists, and they're watching this. And even Alan Jonas says, "Oh, I thought you were going to release them one at a time." And Emma says, "I'm not doing this." And they look back on the screen, and they see what Ghidorah is doing. And Alan Jonas says, "Long live the king." Because that's the new king of the world.
An interesting part about the scene is that Ghidorah's head grows back.
Yes.
So
he has some regenerative ability.
Yep. And they take one look at that, which I don't know why you wouldn't take one look at Ghidorah and be like, that thing ain't from this planet. There's no way. But all the characters just start agreeing after that. Like, Ghidorah's not even a Titan. He's not from this planet.
Yeah, they compare him to an invasive apex predator species.
Invasive species, yeah.
Which is why I believe that the oxygen destroyer didn't work, because he doesn't need oxygen.
Right. That was my thought, too, is he doesn't need it. He's from outer space. He can travel through the void of space, so he probably doesn't even need to breathe.
So it seems that all is lost. And we're about to get into something else that I've been meaning to talk about. So Madison looks at her mom and says, "You're a monster." And she storms off. When Emma's trying to catch up with her down the hall, it turns out that Madison was aware of part of this plan. She wasn't just drug along for the ride. She knew that her mom intended to release a monster. One monster, release a monster one at a time, whatever. She was aware of this. And she has the audacity to be upset that she says, "I thought you were going to release them one at a time." Even though them being released more than one at a time is mostly, it's technically her fault, but it's not her who directly caused it. It's Ghidorah. It was a completely unforeseen. So you have someone, I'm trying to explain my frustration with this. You have a little girl who was aware that her mom planned to release monsters in order to kill millions, but she's mad because more monsters than anticipated have been released.
Yeah, that was another thing about this movie that bothered me as far as plot, that they didn't really they didn't hash this out well enough, anywhere near well enough.
It's just out of character. How does a character get to this point?
Yeah, well, I mean, because this little girl, if she's going to be angry at her mom, she should have been angry with her mother from the onset.
Yes.
As soon as she found out that, hey, you've been siding with this eco-terrorist, and in fact, you're the one running the show, you're the one making these plans and carrying them through. In effect, the eco-terrorists are working for you. You're not working with them. And it's at that point, I would be upset. If I was the little girl, just saying, I would be the one, I would be upset. I would have been upset with mom way earlier in the film.
it nullifies all the scenes they were in when they land in Antarctica, and the eco-terrorists start killing all of the Monarch team that's stationed there. They're acting scared. They're like, "Oh God, people are dying." You're completely okay with people dying. What the fuck?
This girl's been involved with Monarch since she was how old? She probably knows a lot of these people, and they're being offed left and right. And it's what the heck? And she doesn't care. Nobody seems to care. No one cares. These are people you've probably been working with for 10 years, 20 years, your entire life. since you got out of college and you don't care about any of them, you're just gonna let Tywin Lannister kill them all? Okay, whatever.
And they're acting scared, even though, as you said earlier, they're not actually victims or hostages. They're completely okay with this for now.
Yeah.
So they shouldn't be scared.
Yeah, it's their plan, in fact.
Yeah, the mom orchestrated it. She made this entirely possible. So,
No.
you know, if it's just a completely ridiculous scene in my mind to have the daughter be upset about this, like, oh, this was the final straw, but everything before, no, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, there were a lot of things in the human-centric plot points in this movie that I just didn't like at all. I thought they could have been better thought out or better executed.
I'm willing to go along with everything besides this, honestly.
Yeah.
I think that for the most part, what they do with the members of Monarch is fine. Mm-hmm. I'm even okay having the stereotypical alcoholic father loses a child and tries to come back and do some good. Because I thought it was handled mostly okay. His Mark's character is consistent, and he has a very logical reaction to his ex-wife doing crazy shit.
Yeah.
Which is to be like, what the fuck, bitch? Like, really? Yeah. Not like, oh, let's get together and talk about it. No. Yeah. Fuck that. Yeah. It's just, why? Why would they throw this in there? I know that the Godzilla movies will often have human antagonists, but why make it so needlessly convoluted and like they're acting like there's shades of gray here when there really aren't. Yeah. It's just there's evil and then there's slightly worse evil, and we're supposed to choose a side between those two. No. Like, oh, it was fine when you released fucking Ghidorah, but Rodan, that's too far. Like, fuck off. Really? Yeah. What were they even expecting to happen?
Yeah, it was really weird. Like, she just seemed to blame she really just seemed to blame her mom for Ghidorah's actions when her mom had no idea what Ghidorah even was. Like, if she knew, she probably would have never had the monsters. That's the one monster she probably would have kept locked up. But no, it was weird. It was a weird choice, especially at that point in the film.
And that goes back to something that Ken Watanabe said to Emma over the Skype call. And she said, you're messing with forces beyond your comprehension, which is true. Yeah. It's completely true.
Yeah. She had no idea what Ghidorah was. Ghidorah's not even from this planet. He's a completely different species from somewhere else. And this whole order, this weird... it's almost like a worship of hierarchy. I don't know, it's really weird. There were a lot of, like, weird themes I think they tried to play on in this movie, and they did a poor job of it, I think. And it's a lot of it has to do with, like, this scene in particular, like, this part of the film in particular, too. It's just, I don't know.
And honestly, come to think of it, how... Okay, think back. How do they know Ghidorah is an alien? They only know he's an alien, or they're only theorizing because Dr. Chen found these ancient cave drawings that showed that he came from the stars. Are you telling me that the eco-terrorists couldn't find these cave drawings?
And it's funny because all you would have to do is look at Ghidorah and look at his anatomy to figure out that this animal is not from this planet. It's pretty clear just by looking at him that he's not from this planet. The creature has, let's see, the creature has 4 limbs, but he has 2 tails and 3 heads. Like, no animal on this planet has an anatomy like that. No. There's nothing like that anywhere on this planet. Like, you just look at Ghidorah, you could tell, like, he's clearly not from this world. Never mind that he's more intelligent than a lot of monsters. He's clearly on par with humans, maybe even in intellect. So,
and even if they don't look at the cave drawings, they know. It's said, I'm trying to remember the context. They know that he is an apex predator. Right. I think the legend goes that he's the apex predator and the primary competitor to Godzilla. Do they not think that something could go wrong?
Yeah. Well, like, I think they also knew definitively he was an alien when his head grew back. Because at that point, it's like, okay, well, we don't know any animal on Earth that can do that. So he's probably not from around here. It's one thing to grow back a limb or a tail or something. It's something else to grow back an entire head.
Yeah. Then again, there's not a whole lot of animals who can survive a nuke, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that too. Let alone, like...
It's a science fiction movie, people.
Yeah.
Let's not pull our hair out here.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll move past that because that's just incredibly frustrating, honestly.
Yeah.
And it really weighs the movie down. It pains me to say that.
Yeah.
But getting back into the plot, the Monarch is at their lowest because, well, Ghidorah is free. All these Titans are free, and they're all under his control. They have some military briefing where the same idiot who launched the oxygen destroyer is like, he has no idea what's going on. He's like, oh, they're moving randomly. And Mark has to set him straight and says, no, they're moving as a pack, and Ghidorah is the apex predator. He's the alpha. He has control over them. You know, how do I know this and you don't? Really? So basically their plan is, if we take out Ghidorah, we win, because then everyone will stop. Never mind the ramifications of living in a world in which these Titans are now surface, but whatever. Yeah. I guess they don't have time to think about that. So they're considering how they can make this happen. No one really has any answers. At some point, Mark decides he's just going to leave blindly and go try to find Madison, because that's the only thing he has left in the world. He even says so.
No.
And he sees... quite literally a glimmer of light in the sky, glimmer of hope, and who should appear but Mothra. And of course, I failed to mention that at this point, Mothra had come out of her cocoon and is a giant
Can I talk about that scene
butterfly
for a minute?
Yeah, go
ahead.
Go ahead.
Weird. Okay, so the scene when Mothra hatches is a really weird scene to me. It's not a bad scene, it's just a weird one. The reason why I say it's a weird one is because they didn't know that much about Mothra, and they certainly didn't know what side she was going to be on upon coming out of her egg. They just knew that she was going to be a big insectoid-like monster. That's all they really knew about her. And during the scene when she hatches from her egg and takes off into the air, there's a bunch of scientists and a bunch of military guys surrounding her and watching her. And they've all got this weird smile plastered on their face. And I'm not sure why they have it, because they shouldn't. They don't know anything about Mothra. Now, I know Mothra is always benevolent. I know she's in a lot of movies, she's some kind of mystic spirit or whatever.
Yeah, movies in which Godzilla is the villain, Mothra's the noble monster.
Yeah, well, even when he's not, usually she plays some kind of benevolent role. She's a protector of humanity or something. But I don't know, everybody knew that Mothra was going to be on Godzilla's side in this movie. She almost always is. But it was just, I don't know, there were some weird scenes involving Mothra. Everybody was just they knew automatically that she was going to be on their side, I guess. I mean, they didn't have any real reason to, because she's treated like the other Titans really up until that point. And I was just, I don't know, that was a weird thing for me. It wasn't bad. There was a lot of really good stuff going on in that scene, in these scenes, but
and it looks amazing.
Yeah, no, it looks fantastic. Mothra is also very well done. Like I said, all the monsters in this movie were very well done,
and they're also different.
Yeah.
So that I'm sure the visual effects people had some fun trying different styles on all of these iconic creatures.
Be sure.
I didn't think about what you said, but what I would say is, okay, so the people monitoring Mothra were Monarch.
Right.
But somehow Mothra showing up at the main base is a surprise. Yeah. You would have thought that they would have called their friends and said, "Hey, inbound giant butterfly."
Yeah.
But they don't. It's a surprise for some reason. But Mothra shows up, and this is a sign to them that not all hope is lost, because apparently she has some symbiotic relationship with Godzilla, and she speaks in some frequency only Godzilla can hear. and there is a response, and they discover Godzilla's vitals are faint, but they're there, and they are at the bottom of the ocean. So they take the opportunity to have a double-stroked plan of attack here. The military are going to try to distract Ghidorah for as long as they possibly can, which really isn't that long without Godzilla, while he's heading toward Boston and is going to utterly annihilate it. And the scientists are going to do a deep sea dive, and they're going to find Godzilla, and they're going to awaken him with nuclear warheads. And we get one of the most badass lines in the movie where Mark says, "How many nukes you got?" Pretty cool.
Yeah,
So
I liked it.
They end up going down, and at some point the sub crashes, and they're looking at all their readings, and they're like, "No, this is impossible. We're X and X miles away from where we should be. It's almost like we teleported." And the Rick and Morty guy is like, "Yes, this confirms my theory that there are wormholes."
He keeps going on about what's called Hollow Earth theory.
Yep.
Yeah, no, he brings this up a couple times, even before that, where he's just like, now we know how Godzilla gets around as fast as he does, because he just moves through these big cave-like structures, like buried deep underground, to get from point A to point B. And he starts freaking out about Hollow Earth, and everybody's telling him to shut up.
Yeah, shut the fuck up, dude. Like, yeah, okay, you were right. That's great. So they get their bearings, and they end up coming across this underwater city. There's just ruins, and they're saying, "What is it? Is it Roman? Is it Egyptian?" And they're like, "No, it's much older."
Yeah, it looks like a little bit of both, but it's much older. Yeah.
And this, as well as the cave paintings we see of a lot of the Titans, and as well as the several references to them as the original gods, stand out to me as the most overt Lovecraftian themes and references in this movie. Yeah, and is a big part of the reason why we're covering it on this show.
Yeah, that right there, that was a big, like...
I mean, it's like straight out of Dagon. You're at the bottom of the sea.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, the whole with the pillar underwater with a bunch of monsters and everything sketched into it. That was right out of Dagon.
That had to have been an influence. I refuse to believe otherwise.
No, this is definitely one of the most Lovecraftian parts of the movie. And this scene alone is worth talking about because they find Atlantis.
Yeah, pretty much. It's Atlantis. And it is discovered, unfortunately, that during the sub-crash, their weapon systems were damaged, so they can't deliver the payload. And quite tragically, Ken Watanabe volunteers to sacrifice himself in order to revive Godzilla. And then we get a very emotional scene of him leaving, and he gives Mark his journal, and he says goodbye to everyone. And he emerges in this, in just this room. This, I guess it's like a source of radiation where Godzilla's gone to recover and nurse his wounds and try to get some life back in him. And it's his home.
He's laying on a big steeped pyramid that the Atlanteans had built in that area. And you can see statues and stuff with like Godzilla depictions and everything else. So these Atlanteans worshipped Godzilla as a god. And that might be why he's hanging out there. That might be part of the reason. That and the radiation, obviously.
It's just a familiar place.
Yeah.
But Ken Watanabe, he climbs the stairs of this pyramid and he sets a timer on the nuclear bomb. And he goes up to Godzilla and he takes off his helmet. He puts his hand against his scales and he says in Japanese, "Goodbye, old friend," before we get probably one of the coolest scenes in the movie and it's with no sound, where we see the chamber and Atlantis completely annihilated by the nuclear bomb. And the pushback pushes the sub up onto the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take too long before they see a very familiar blue glow under the water, and Godzilla emerges. And at first, he looks a little pissed because he had a nuke blow up in his face. And he and Mark have a moment, I guess, where they come to some understanding about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark he's taken on the position of Ken Watanabe in a big way. Because he asked him to look after everyone. And then Godzilla turns away because he wants to find himself a dragon to slay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, and we should have mentioned it throughout, because this movie has a really good score.
Mm-hmm.
That's another really good part of this movie. I mean, you have to for a movie like this.
Yeah, they did they pulled a lot of the old scores too, like a lot of the old music from the old Godzilla films for this. It was really awesome.
The music for this scene especially is just epic. When you see Godzilla come out of the water, it's like, oh shit, it's on. Okay. Okay, buckle in. I'm trying to remember exactly what happens after this. I believe that at this point, Madison has taken the orca.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to use it because she hears her mom arguing with Alan Jonah about, potentially stopping King Ghidorah. Obviously, the terrorists have no intention of doing that because he's everything they could have wanted and more when it comes to wiping the slate clean.
Mm-hmm.
But she's having second thoughts, and we're supposed to feel bad for her again. Yuck.
Yeah.
Madison takes the orca, and she's going to use it at Fenway Park in Boston to basically broadcast a signal out to the world that will halt the other monsters. She's successful in this, and the other monsters stop what they're doing, stop their rampaging.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, because this is the signal acts as a competitive alpha, it attracts the attention of King Ghidorah, who initially thinks it's coming from some speakers in the baseball stadium and just easily destroys them. And it's just, it's a bad day to be a Red Sox fan, is what someone says, as the entire Fenway Park is just destroyed by King Ghidorah. He eventually notices that the signal is coming from inside with Madison, and he tries to destroy her with lightning breath, a bit excessive. And she runs, and she's tripping around, and she's about to be just incinerated by Ghidorah when who should show up but Godzilla. He actually lands his atomic breath this time.
Yep.
And blows Ghidorah across the baseball stadium. He shows up with the military because this time Mark said, we're going to join the fight. So it's a joint effort to take on King Ghidorah. And while the monsters are fighting, we see that Mark and a team have taken down a carrier. They're trying to find the orca and his daughter. So they are doing that, and of course it doesn't go well for some of the soldiers. I think one of them breaks their leg. I don't know. Something like that. They're able to find the orca, but they are not able to find Madison. She has fled by that point. So they attempt to get out of there, but their carrier is destroyed. And it is at that point that Emma drives up in a Jeep that she took, because she's relinquished her evil ways at this point, apparently.
Yeah.
And she's like, get in, They're like very skeptical, of course, at first. Like, okay, I guess we don't have a choice. So they get in. And
Lady Hitler told us to get in.
Lady Hitler told us to get in. And while they're driving, they take time to break the car because one of the soldiers is saying, oh, they're terrible parents. And all they can think of is, wait a minute. Oh, that's where she had to have gone. She went home. I would have ran away. I would have ran away from my home, is what the soldier says. So that's what makes them think of home. And I don't know the logic of this. So during a giant monster fight, Madison decided to go home, even though...
I can kind of it wouldn't necessarily be a logical decision. It would be one, based off of like animalistic fear, kind of.
Mhm.
It would like at that point, I don't think she was really like thinking rationally
No.
because she just had such a close brush with death. And even then, like Ghidorah and Godzilla are fighting right over her. So like she probably just kind of lost it. I don't necessarily like blame her for not necessarily like
That's
being
fair.
logical in
That's
that
fair.
decision.
I do have to question why the front door is open.
Yeah, no kidding. Like, don't you guys lock your house?
They haven't locked it for a long fucking time
Yeah,
at this point.
however many years that you've been gone.
It's whatever. It's a movie. I'm not gonna get too hung up. But also who should join the fight, but because Godzilla is actually not doing all that well, and he has 3 heads to contend with, so it makes sense. And Ghidorah is larger than him to a degree. But Mothra shows up and webs Ghidorah to a building, and Godzilla uses that opportunity to knock him through the building. And then Rodan shows up, and he and Mothra have an air battle.
That was a cool scene too.
Very cool. So we have a 2-on-2 fight here, and that's just generally going. At some point in the fight, we see that Rodan has badly injured Mothra, but Mothra is able to stick him with some kind of stinger, and he falls on the ground and is writhing in pain. And at that point, Mothra's not contributing much to the fight, and her wings are all burned up.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think. They're trying to. They decide that they need to reset the Orca because it's going to be the only way to really give Godzilla a fighting chance. It's also revealed at this point that because of the nuclear explosion, Godzilla is he's set to go thermonuclear in a couple minutes, and basically at that point you need to be clear because it will be like an atomic bomb is going off in the city. So they only have so much time, but they're trying to reset the Orca, and we see that Godzilla is getting his ass handed to him. And at one point, King Ghidorah even flies him into the air and drops him from such a height that he's entering the Earth's atmosphere again and burning up.
Yeah, from re-entry, yeah. That was a cool scene.
Godzilla, he's a trooper. He survives that, but he's not hanging in very well. And it looks like things are not going to go his way. Mothra climbs on top of him, and in a final show of defiance, she tries to lunge at Ghidorah and dies. Apparently, the wiki's telling me she died. She gets vaporized.
Yeah, she gets vaporized completely.
Yeah, I don't
but
like
not
that,
before
honestly.
she's able to use her healing powers on Godzilla one last time.
Yes,
get him back on his feet.
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know. I think that's kind of a waste, to be honest.
Yeah, they'll there's usually more than one Mothra, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's another egg somewhere.
Yeah, that would
they'll
be
bring her back
preferable.
in another movie probably.
But Mothra is dead at this point, so it really is just Godzilla and Ghidorah. And at this point, the Orca has been reactivated, and it is getting the attention of Ghidorah, and he's charging toward the humans. So they're going to leave with it in the helicarrier. Obviously, if they leave it in that carrier, it's a fucking helicopter. He's going to destroy it. So it can't outrun a flying dragon monster. So Emma decides to get it, put it in her Jeep, and drive away and try to divert Ghidorah. And the family is very forlorn, and they fly off. And this is when they're really trying to make us feel bad for Emma, the reason why any of this has happened. She's driving, and she gets knocked off the road, and she's knocked out of the Jeep, and Ghidorah approaches her and is about to eat her, apparently. And she says, "Long live the king," because, of course, we see Godzilla has gotten up. He has gone thermonuclear at this point in, honestly, what's the coolest scene of the movie. And probably one of the coolest Godzilla-related things ever.
Yeah.
And he is glowing red and just brimming with radiation. And he attacks Ghidorah with these like pulses of energy. In the first pulse, he completely melts his wings. In the second pulse, he melts 2 of his heads.
Mm-hmm.
And then he stands on his chest, and there's just a lot of ruckus and destruction. And we see that there's a final explosion, and then there's just all this ash everywhere, and it looks like Ghidorah rises again, but it turns out to just be his final head in the mouth of Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses his atomic breath to turn it to ash.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
It was awesome. Such a good scene.
What do you think about just the final battle in general?
Oh, I thought it was great. Both monsters looked fantastic.
And I don't mind that it was at night either. I'm sure some people do, but I don't.
Like I said, there are technical reasons why they do that. And I've heard some complaints from some people on like other YouTube channels about it. It's not something that bothers me as much, just because I understand why they do it. There were maybe some instances where I would have liked to like see Ghidorah in the daylight, but it wasn't like a deal breaker for me by any means.
And we do during the scene where he fights Rodan, but that's very brief.
Yeah, it is very brief, but it's probably one of the best looking scenes in the movie, where he's standing over the volcano and you have that cross in the foreground and there's lightning everywhere. Oh, so cool.
Yeah, they utilize his power as well. I forgot to mention it, but during the fight at one point he bit this like electrical power plant line, and he's able to set off this massive storm. Yeah, and those effects just look amazing.
That's what cuts the humans out of the fight, because the humans were backing Godzilla up until that point.
Yeah, he knocks most of the planes out of the sky at that point.
Yeah, unleashes an EMP. Yeah, Ghidorah is super smart. This was just a really good. It's just an incredible fight scene from start to finish. I really don't have anything negative to say about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, no. Initially, I was thinking that it would have been cool to see some of the other monsters involved, but I mean that could have devolved into a clusterfuck pretty quick.
Yeah, and a lot of those monsters too were like, I don't know. Other than the main 4, I don't know if I cared for a lot of their designs.
Yeah,
it seemed really.
Well,
there was that one that stuck out was that giant mammoth looking thing.
Yeah,
that's the one that stuck out to me the most.
Actually,
they do bring up Kong, but they don't actually show him in the movie anywhere.
Yeah, he's only shown in a brief like scene in the military meeting or something like that.
Yeah,
or when they're talking about it with Congress.
Well, and he's the one Titan that doesn't like go on a rampage either. So
because he's a predator himself.
Right. Well, and he's stuck on Skull Island too. I don't think like there's a lot for him to do.
He really showed that vegetation who's boss. But anyway, it should be said that after this fight, we see some of these other Titans approaching Godzilla. The mammoth creature is noted. There's a giant spider. I'm pretty sure that was the spider from Kong Skull Island. Maybe
it could be. It could
or
be
some kind of similar species. We see one of the Mythos and Rodan and I think a few others. And Rodan, bows. They all bow because he is the newly Christian king of the monsters. So we have a new apex predator who is not going to destroy the world. And after he destroys Ghidorah, I'm pretty sure the Rick and Morty guy says, "Jesus, I'm glad he's on our side." And they're like, one of the scientists is like, "Yeah, for now."
Yeah, for now. Yeah.
which is a good bit of foreshadowing. At that point, the movie pretty much ends. Did you stay for the post-credit scene?
I did not. I wish I had, because I've heard it was excellent, but I didn't.
So I'll describe it very briefly, but the post-credit scene features Alan Jonah and some of his mercs. They've survived this whole ordeal, and they're led into a warehouse by some poor fishermen in some undisclosed, I'm guessing, South American, Central American country. Probably in Mexico, based on what they find. But inside, they find a severed head of King Ghidorah. And it's gathered a lot of flies. And Alan Jonah smiles and he just says, we'll take it.
But that's a really cool scene.
So they'll probably make some kind of mecha King Ghidorah or something.
Yeah, they might. I was really surprised that when I heard about that scene initially, because I hadn't seen it, but I had heard about it, that they didn't just leave Ghidorah's head on that it didn't just like regenerate. Since he's able to regenerate a head, I thought maybe a head might be able to regenerate a body, but
that's entirely possible. Maybe there wasn't enough tissue there with just a head, but if they use some kind of genetic manipulation on it, they can make that happen.
Yeah, maybe.
Make him return stronger than ever. Yeah, no. I like leaving the door open because I don't want Ghidorah to be dead forever. I don't want Mothra to be dead forever. That's a waste.
No, they'll have a Mecha Ghidorah, and there might even be room for Mecha Godzilla later on down the line. There's probably a lot of monsters that the studio that made this doesn't own. They don't have the rights to them, and so for one reason or another had to remain out of this movie. I think Varen's in this movie. I could be wrong. He's just like a giant lizard. But
because there was one that looked like a giant turtle.
Yeah, a lot of the mutos, or a lot of the monsters in this film are obviously original creations, because they couldn't afford. Like, I'm amazed they managed to get the monsters they got.
I'm amazed they managed to get the studios on board to do a King Kong versus Godzilla movie.
Yeah, I'm surprised after the 1998 film that they let another American company have a shot at a Godzilla film at all.
That's a good point too.
Because like I didn't even okay, in 1998 I was like 8 years old, 10 years old maybe, and so like I thought it was a good movie at the time, but I was 10. So what the hell did I know? I go back and I watch the movie now. I'm like, okay, I can see why people hated it. I can see why the Japanese in particular hate this film. Mm-hmm. The monster in that film isn't really Godzilla. He's a cool monster, but he's not Godzilla. Ironically, that movie spawned an animated series that I thoroughly enjoy to this day. It's so good. It's so much better than the movie. Holy crap.
I haven't seen it, but I have heard good things about it.
Yeah, it's so much better. One thing that I thought the orca might have been a reference to, and I hope I'm wrong, is there was a Godzilla Hanna-Barbera cartoon that they made way back in like the 70s, and it was so just cringy bad. It was so bad. They must have had at least 24 episodes. So it was a 2-year long running thing, at least. And the reason I say the orc is a throwback to that is because in that series, which I don't think it is really, but in that series, there's this. It stars this family, like they're a family of scientists or whatever, and they're on this boat out in the ocean, and they study these giant monsters for a living or whatever. They're like a pseudo monarch kind of thing, and anytime one of these monsters starts trouble, they use this little button to summon Godzilla and have him fight the monsters for them. And so you get this really goofy looking Godzilla to like fight these monsters for him. And the worst part about that series was Godzilla Jr. They name him Godzuki, and he's like a little Godzilla but with wings, and he just puffs smoke out of his mouth, and he's like a pet kind of, and the family just kind of has him around. Godzuki.
Hopefully he doesn't make an appearance in any of these
Hopefully
movies.
not, because even in the Toho movies he was a terrible character. They don't need him.
Yeesh. Yeesh. But anyway, so as we wrap this up, I wanted to cover it from 2 different angles. So I think we'll start with our final thoughts on this movie and maybe potential things we're looking forward to for this series, and then to how we feel it handled themes that are covered up regularly on this show. But what are your general thoughts on this movie?
I thought it was a fantastic movie. It was definitely better than the 2014 movie. they handled a lot of the mistakes from that movie better in this one. It's by no means a perfect film. It does have some problems. Um, Overall, I guess if I had like a score rating system, 10 being the highest, I would give it a solid 8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Because the monsters were amazingly well designed. CGI was fantastic and didn't look like crap. That's something that a lot of movies get wrong, um, especially when they're really heavy in the CGI department. They tend to go overboard with the bright colors and stuff. And I mean, Mothra in particular had a lot of like bright highlights to her, but it wasn't egregiously done. It wasn't so ridiculously over the top. The acting, for the most part, was absolutely spot on. There was only one actor in this entire film I disliked, and that was the guy, the Rick guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was even less his fault and more like the role he was playing. As far as the different roles, Emma's my least favorite character. She makes zero sense to me. I don't think she was very well written at all. Everybody else is pretty passable. Yeah, overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I can see why it got the Metacritic score it got, but I can also see why it got a 91% as far as the tomatoes, the Rotten Tomatoes scoring system.
Oh, was that for audience enjoyability?
Like audience enjoyability, right?
Yeah, no.
Is what I was going for. Yeah,
this is a good audience pleaser.
Yeah.
I think you made a good point that they clearly listened to criticism they got from the 2014 film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's the criticism of that movie? It's too dark. No one can see what's going on. Mm-hmm. There's not enough monster fights. I mean, they would cut away from them, and the monsters featured in it aren't any monsters that a Godzilla fan would care about.
Right.
So they obviously listened to that and they said, you know what, for this next one, we're taking a break, but we're going to really take our time to bring these iconic characters to the big screen once more. Mm-hmm. And that's really all you could ask for this type of movie. Mm-hmm. And I don't expect for the human subplots to be all that deep. It really could just be a bunch of military jargon for all I care.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't expect, like, considering most Godzilla films have less plot than this, if I'm going to be perfectly honest.
Oh yes, absolutely.
As far as plot goes, this was probably the most plot-heavy Godzilla film I think I've ever seen. And for the most part, they do a really good job with it. There are obviously, as we've said, some issues, but just in general, I thought it was definitely a marked improvement plot-wise over the other films. So.
And yeah, that's the thing. The plot heaviness sometimes really does weigh it down, and that is easily a point off for this one. Is the handling of Emma as a character, the handling of Madison as a character. Mm-hmm. I just was not digging that. I could rant about that for days, and we already did. So
yeah, and the Mothra scene I mentioned earlier. One thing I forgot about. One of the women, one of the background characters. She's mostly a background character. One of the Japanese women is, I guess, one of the twins from. It's supposed to be hinted at that she's one of the twins from one of the older Godzilla movies where Mothra
there was Easter eggs like that I really didn't understand.
Yeah, no, there were lots of Easter eggs in there like that, and that might have been why they were so happy that Mothra was being hatched. I can't remember if she told them that, hey, Mothra's a good guy. I don't remember, but maybe that was why. But
one of the scientists definitely, when Mothra cocooned herself, believed that, we don't know necessarily, that Mothra will be evil. They had some, and of course the legend goes that Mothra is an ally of Godzilla and shouldn't be on board with the wave of destruction that's happening.
Yeah.
So okay, that's fine. I can excuse that away even. But no, getting away from the negatives, the action is great. The effects are largely really great, and it's such a fun movie for what it represents. It's not a turn your brain off movie because there is a lot going on, but I think they really do a good job of portraying Godzilla as this character who is a protagonist technically, but is to be feared and is to be respected, and it's very fortunate that he has chosen the side of humanity, and that is something that the movie gets across very well. How are you feeling about this movie relating to themes that we cover on this show?
So H.P. Lovecraft deals a lot with the unknown. There's an element of that in this film, but it's not too heavy. They go out of their way to like discover and like learn what these monsters are about. There's definitely a sense of not just foreboding, but like helplessness. That humans are completely at the mercy of both Ghidorah and Godzilla. That I think definitely plays into the themes of Lovecraft a bit. Being at the mercy of creatures that you don't really understand, being at the mercy of creatures who could overwhelm and destroy you with very little effort on their part. That's a very Lovecraft.
And to get into that, we mentioned the scene earlier where Rodan flies over the city and without even attempting to, just annihilates it with the huge amount of wind he's creating. And that, and we see other scenes like that, honestly, where Ghidorah is chasing soldiers, and just through moving through the environment, a lot of them just die without him even attempting to kill them. He does he does kill some intentionally, and that is what it is. But I mean, that is a very Lovecraftian plot element, to have people die as a result of some ancient god that did not mean to kill them.
And Ghidorah himself can kind of be seen as a homage to Lovecraft a little bit, I think, because he's an alien. He's from outer space. We know less about him than we do about any of these other monsters. We don't know where he came from. We don't know why he's here. We don't know what he's about. Those are definitely fairly Lovecraftian themes. And then obviously Atlantis, all those obelisks with Godzilla and Ghidorah on them. There's definitely a hint of Lovecraft in this. I'm not going to say that they obviously based any of it off of his work, but they did draw upon him, I think, a little bit when they made this IP, not just this movie, but the IP in general.
Yeah, it's not the primary influence for sure, and you can date back what the original Godzilla was meant to be an allegory for. It's an allegory for the dangers of nuclear war. So it goes back a lot further, and it has completely different cultural connotations than American horror fiction.
Correct.
But this is an American film, and American media is saturated with Lovecraftian themes, whether they know it or not.
Yep.
And that's a big part of what we uncover here. I'm thinking, though, that the scene underwater did have a direct effect.
Oh, yeah. That was definitely ripped from Dagon. That whole thing was ripped from Dagon. I was like, dang, dude, they didn't even try to hide it.
And it's really cool. It's really cool to see that realized on screen.
I thought it was really great. So.
Especially because we covered that so recently. But I would probably agree with your rating that an 8 is a good score for this movie. And if they honestly had eliminated some of the convoluted human plots, easily a 9 or 10, just based on the action and excitement alone. It is a very I think that people who are going into this hoping for some deeper narrative are going to the wrong movie. That's not what this is.
You don't go to a Godzilla movie for narrative ever.
It's about the experience, and it's about the themes that the characters represent, and what they represent to humanity. You see Mothra, the way they capture that with the music and the effects. Mothra is meant to symbolize hope. Godzilla is meant to be this stern protector that we kind of have to rely on, but isn't always on our side. Ghidorah represents the threat from another world that is completely destructive, and that's symbolized by storms. Rodan is a fire demon. That's what really makes this movie work, that they got all of these iconic creatures, that they're all so different, and they were able to throw them all in a big blockbuster is an achievement. And this is the direction the series should be going, and we'll see how Godzilla versus Kong goes next year.
Yeah, I can't wait for that one.
But I think that will do the show for today. Of course, if you wish to contact us, you can either leave a comment in the comment section down below. And if it's substantial enough, it has any questions, comments, or concerns, we will read that on the show. Or you could email us at courtofazathothshow@gmail.com. And as always, I've been Reese.
And I'm Zach.
And we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.